A story you will not see anywhere else about an experience taking an ocean cruise that you probably think is safe. It may not be, at least not always, and we're not talking about something going wrong with the ship. This is a story, a 360 exclusive, about crime at sea, about how much more common it is than you may realize, and how little protection the victims may have from it, and in the end, how little justice some may be getting. More now from Drew Griffin.
It was the cruise of a lifetime, a family spending New Year's rounding the volcanic White Island off New Zealand's coast on board Royal Caribbean's Rhapsody of the Seas, January 1, 2010. This girl, then 15, decided to spend the morning alone in her cabin, and the trip of a lifetime turned to terror as her locked door to cabin 3073 suddenly clicked.
I didn't hear the card key go in, but I did hear like the door open and like the lock like, oh yeah. And I thought it was my brother or sister at first. And then when I saw the guy come in, I didn't recognize the bartender uniform. It was someone working on the ship, so then I thought it was a room attendant that was going to clean my room because I didn't put the sign like, oh, don't disturb or whatever.
It wasn't a room attendant. It was a crew member dressed in a bartender's uniform, threatening the girl not to say a word, she says, as he forced the teen to perform oral sex. At her family's request, we are not showing her face.
You were 15?
Yeah.
Scared? You didn't tell your family?
No. At the time on the cruise, I didn't want to ruin the vacation for them because it had already been ruined for me.
Up on deck, her mother says the girl's demeanor instantly changed. She was clingy, never left her side for the rest of the cruise. It wasn't until 2 months later the secret broke.
Do you feel the person who attacked you, that this was the first time he attacked anybody?
No, because the way he did it, he walked in like he already knew what he was doing.
Do you feel he was a predator?
Yes.
Randy Jakes has a very strong opinion about the likelihood of criminals on board.
Every single cruise that leaves the Port of Miami, Port Everglades, Cape Canaveral, Port Canaveral, here in the state of Florida, has a minimum of one perpetrator, whether it be passenger or crew, on board its vessel each week.
Jakes is a former ship's security officer. He now investigates onboard crimes for victims and lawyers who may want to file civil lawsuits. He says there is no doubt cruise ships have become magnets for predators who feel safe at sea, far from police jurisdictions. And given the nature of cruises with lots of alcohol, parents who leave children unattended, the predator passengers and, yes, predator crew members, he says, feel they can get away with almost anything.
Yes, this is true. There are a considerable amount of male perpetrators out there that are passengers and crew that get on board these vessels with the only one thing in mind, and that is to accost as many female passengers as they can, whether by getting them overly intoxicated or by using date rape drugs.
They're rapists.
Yes, they're rapists.
And according to Jakes, who worked for 2 major cruise lines, crew members are often complicit, even using onboard computers, passenger manifests, to spot their prey.
You know this?
Yes, I know this for a fact.
The actual cruise ship.
Hard to believe? We thought so too until we met Laura Haynes, who worked for 17 years as an agent with Customs and Border Protection. Her main job, she says, was dealing with passengers and staff on cruise ships, and she shares the same opinion and concerns as Jakes.
So your estimate of ships that go out to sea, loaded with passengers that may have at least one predator on board,
Yes.
is
85%.
You heard right, 85%. Crimes are rarely reported, and in many instances, even if caught, crew members could still end up on another ship.
And the cruise lines say that doesn't happen, and I know for a fact it does, because I've seen it.
The Cruise Line International Association disputes her assertion. In an email to CNN, a spokesman told us it is disconcerting that this individual would irresponsibly offer such inflammatory and unfounded accusations. The safety of passengers and crew are the cruise industry's #1 priority, and no one is served when broad and alarming statements are made that have no basis in fact. The cruise industry points to a law passed by Congress as recently as 2010 that for the first time called for the public reporting of all crimes on board American cruise ships at sea, and cites only a handful of the millions of passengers were the victims of any kind of crime. Critics say that's because most crimes aren't even reported, and even fewer, especially sexual assaults, says Randy Jakes, are ever solved.
The criminal knows this, don't they?
The criminals know this. The passengers that are criminals know this. The crew members that are criminals know this.
And now this teenager knows this, too. When she finally reported her crime to the FBI, 2 months after the event took place, an FBI agent in Riverside, California, took the report, found her story to be credible, and forwarded the information to police in Australia and New Zealand, in an attempt, he wrote in this report, to identify a possible child predator on board a Royal Caribbean cruise liner. The girl's family sued the cruise line, which settled the case, but the family says it never heard from police in Australia or New Zealand.
We had no one to contact over there that was getting our report. It was just sent over there and then it kind of disappeared.
In a statement, Royal Caribbean said once it was informed of the assault, it notified the FBI, New Zealand authorities, and Interpol. It also said it provided the FBI with 50 to 60 pictures of crew members, but, quote, unfortunately, the guest was unable to identify the crew member in question. Royal Caribbean insisted it continuously supported law enforcement during the investigation of this incident. Additionally, the cruise line says its security personnel have been trained by the FBI and use FBI procedures. It's been more than 2 years. There has been no arrest.
In effect, the person that assaulted you did get away.
Yeah.
And could very well still be floating around somewhere.
Yes.
Drew, I find this report amazing. I really had no idea. Where are the police in all of this?
You know, Anderson, these cruise ships are floating cities. Everything both good and bad that goes on in a small city can happen at sea. Outside the 12-mile limit, it's the FBI that has the official jurisdiction. But, of course, the FBI isn't on board, so the answer is there are no cops to call, which is why this former onboard ship security officer tells us it's so hard to both retain evidence and investigate any crime on board a ship.
The cruise line industry says that incidents like the one you described, though, are extremely rare. I mean, out of all the millions of passengers who've sailed, it is a tiny fraction who run into problems like this, right?
And with the records they have, that is true. But we don't know what is and is not reported. We don't know if what is reported to a cabin boy, a bartender, or somebody else on that ship eventually goes into the data file of the criminal records. The experts tell us, look, we're not trying to frighten anybody, Anderson, but think of it this way. If you went to the mall with 4,000 people, or if you took your family to a huge hotel with an amusement park, what kind of safety efforts would you take? A lot of that breaks down on these cruises, and that is what makes predators so tempted to get on these ships along with all these other people who let their guard down, have a party atmosphere, and know that in many cases they can't get away with it.